What up? This is Rama Screen, and in the anticipation of Sacrifice, which arrives in select theaters February 5, on demand February 9th, and Blu-ray February 23, I'm here talking with the directing team of this new film, Andy and Tor. How are you, Andy and Tor?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
In the world of horror, there have been many creepy cult stories over the years. One that's recent to memory is Ari Aster's Midsommar, among many other examples. So in your process of adapting Paul's short story, what were the things that you wanted to retain, and what were the things that you wanted to add in to put a fresh spin on this genre?
Well, it's interesting you've mentioned Midsummer to start off with, so because in terms of creating this story at its very genesis, we did think, oh, wouldn't it be cool to set something in Scandinavia? That hasn't been done much, and I'm actually half Norwegian, and then just before we started shooting, Midsummer, of course, was released, and what seemed very, very original at its conception was suddenly inevitably going to be compared to Midsummer. But we believe, apart from the surface similarities of our tale being set in Scandinavia, thankfully it isn't too similar to Midsummer, we hope. What do you think?
Yes, agree. And I think luckily the stories are very different. I mean, first of all, the visuals, we tried to move away from the Wicker Man, which I think Midsummer was also inspired by, but where Midsummer embraced it, and that was very bright and very sunny and very flowery, we were deliberately very dark. So I think that element's different. And also, what we tried to explore in the cult aspect is that none of the cult members actually wanted to be cult members. You know, Cthulhu found them, they didn't find Cthulhu. And so they're all reluctant victims of circumstance, whereas most other cult movies, and Midsummer in particular, they aren't. You know, they kind of, cultists like being cultists. Whereas in our story, other than Isaac, who likes to be accepted, the cultists wish they were somewhere else. So I think, yeah, I think it's slightly different in that way.
I know the word Lovecraftian has been used to describe this film, understandably so. But I want to ask you, in your conception of the slumbering one, what are the other influences that come into that?
Yeah, I think, well, originally Paul Kane's story, I mean, it's definitely Lovecraftian, but it's kind of, the creature in there is kind of like a Children of the Corn farming deity, but it's about fabric rather than corn. You know, so it was, and I think when we relocated to Norway and started scouting locations, it was obviously very, very nautical, you know, and really the story that influenced the script more than any other is the Call of Cthulhu. Although you might not think there's any real similarities, I think the nightmares and the dreams and the fixation on art and stuff like that, it was very, very Call of Cthulhu, and the Lovecraft universe in general, but really that's that one story. And it was kind of an evolution in that every time we went to visit locations, we did another draft of the script, and it naturally became much more Call of Cthulhu, I think, Tor, and that's where it came from.
Fun question for both of you. So directing team, if there are disagreements on the set, how did you guys reconcile and overcome that obstacle?
Well, I think we have all the disagreements and all the fights and all the name calling in a year before we shoot. You know, so we work through all that beforehand, and so sometime before shooting, we have, you know, we've agreed on a common vision. And we often, I have one idea which Tor thinks is terrible, and he has one idea which I think is terrible. And then after lots of fighting, somebody comes up with a third idea which we both think is better.
No, well, I think Andy's completely correct. I think Hitchcock actually said the most boring part of making a film is actually the shooting process. And so, as Andy pointed out, we've essentially shot the film, at least in our collective mind, before the actual filming process. So when we're actually on set, we do, for better or worse, have a unified vision. And on this particular film, Andy was also the cinematographer. So he ran the cinematography department, and I mainly liaised with the actors, although of course there was a crossover in terms of both departments. But our vision, again, for better or worse, was pretty much set during already before the shooting process, and that meant that neither of us, again, for better or worse, could be really spontaneous in terms of changing our overall vision of the film while we were actually shooting. So I mean, it sounds quite dull, but in many respects, the actual practicalities of filming was a very ABC process, because Andy and I had already gone through our collectively creative process beforehand. So it was more about managing the production at that stage, and then obviously convincing everyone else on set of our collective vision of the film, which is another a thing entirely.
Fortunately, we didn't have a cinematographer to disagree with us.
Yeah, exactly.
Was Barbara Crampton your first and only choice for that character? And did Barbara have to go through some kind of a Norwegian boot camp to make her sound and look Norwegian?
The first question, no, she wasn't. Originally, the cult leader was a man, and you know, the person we wrote it, you know, we had in mind when we wrote it, just so we could kind of crystallize the character, was James Cosmo. So, you know, if you can picture James, it's a very different kind of character. But after we were exploring that these people actually didn't want to be in the cult, and so they're kind of ambiguous, we thought that a female cult leader would be really good. And then I think Barbara was the obvious choice, because, you know, she's a great actress and she's got a huge kind of Lovecraftian heritage. So it was a natural choice, and we were lucky enough that she liked the script and agreed to do it.
And she certainly looks Scandinavian, which is a big help.
That's very true. So finally, what, you know, the mythologies of elves, leprechauns, the slumbering one, what have you, this mythology, these urban legends, these urban creatures, what do they say about us, mankind?
I guess this is quite Lovecraftian in that people have always been or always were afraid of the dark and the unknown, and people try to rationalize that, and they, you know, and they invent tales to make them feel comfortable that they can understand the world, I think, you know, and often people want to be in control, and there's kind of a Lovecraftian paradox that Lovecraft turns that upside down and says, actually, humans are insignificant. I think that's why it's so, you know, so appealing and so different, and it stood the test of time.
Tor?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, and I think it's essentially because human beings are bored, and and it's the same reason we make films. Well, most people would argue we've invented these so-called mythical creatures just to give a bit of a flavor to our existence, and that's the same reason we've made this film, I guess, is to alleviate the mundanity of everyday existence, or they exist, and you know, we're all doomed to be destroyed by them eventually.
It sounds like you're looking forward to that date, or
I can't wait.
All right, for my fans at home, go check out Sacrifice in select theaters February 5, on demand February 9th, and on Blu-ray February 23. Andy and Tor, thank you for talking to me, and congratulations.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Rama.
Rama.